That's the 575
The
corridor.
premium could go up.
No,
No.
the impact to us,
Yeah.
if we have to pay $575, it could be up to $500,000. But keep in mind that we only do that if we achieved double that in savings.
Right, we can take a snapshot along the lines of what Laura and Bobby George saying,
So
right, in
we've
2020.
gained.
What we don't know is how OneCare plays out in the future. We can't know that. So for example, OneCare is already asking the legislature for more Medicaid money. And Medicaid, and the legislature, at least initially, what we're hearing is not receptive to that. So if OneCare doesn't get the Medicaid funding it needs from the state, what are the potential ramifications of that? Not just for Medicaid, but for the commercial market. I don't know that, right? And if it continues to not make the kind of returns on Medicare that it expects, what does that mean for the commercial market? As its administrative budget continues to go up, its administrative budget went from 12 million in 2018 to a proposed 19 million in 2020.
Because they had more covered lives.
Well, but
We
they are,
aren't
but,
paying an admin fee.
right, but,
We're only paying claims, and we're only paying more than $325 if we have demonstrated savings in claims.
How long does that last? I mean,
One-
could they go for the $21? Do they wanna work their way back to that
Well-
model?
So
Well,
Blue
that's-
Cross has said, and these are things we can change our contract with Blue Cross, and we can
Okay.
and hold them accountable through a performance agreement. Blue Cross has said, they told OneCare, it is a deal breaker for them to pay any kind of admin fee for, on behalf of any of their clients. And we have told Blue Cross that is a deal breaker for us. If they came and proposed it, we would revolt. And they said that they would revolt before it got to us.
Anyhow, the upshot is, that's why it seemed wise to have a conversation about this rather than put us in the decision-making mode today, because we don't know we don't know enough about what.
Do you wanna look at calendars, maybe over dinner and
I
find the
think that'd be a
dates?
good idea. Tracy, did you wanna
I
add
just,
something? You did before. I
yeah,
know.
just briefly say that our conversations about this will unfold as the implications of the current premium increases become evident on a statewide
That's
basis.
fair too.
And that's part of the political
Mhm.
reality that we're having to
Right,
navigate.
so we're living with the TPA experience and about to experience the double-digit increase experience.
And about to have a commission,
And we're about to have a decision about.
which has ramifications for us as well.
also, OnePress is also generating a lot more press, and OneCare is generating a lot more press than it used to, some of which is negative, which is gonna generate questions. The auditor has a report on OneCare due in the spring, was not allowed the authority to audit OneCare by the legislature. All of that is gonna factor at some point, I think, into our thinking. And OneCare actually resisted opening its board meetings to the public. That had to be forced by
That's
the
right. That
legislature.
was stunning.
So these are all concerns that I think we should just keep in mind as we talk about our future relationship with this organization. We can just look at 2020, but I think we got an obligation to look at where all the other potential problems might be in the future as well.
I'm assuming we won't be able to get a number of people in at the same time. I agree we should look at our calendars as we eat. I also think that we can manage within the time frame somewhat here. I guess dinner must be ready.
It's been ready for half an hour,
Well, we
45
better-
minutes.
We better eat, but I guess
You
we're
come back?
aboard, we need a motion to get some action.
You don't need a motion to set a meeting date and invite Andrew Garland to your next meeting. You can
But
just,
the meeting, but it's not just.
recognize him.
My suggestion is Andrew Garland, certainly as the author of the memo that precipitated our discussion, but someone from OneCare and someone from the health care policy analyst.
do you want them all at one meeting?
No, I would, but I don't think we can do that.
I was gonna ask.
That's what I started to say. I don't think we can arrange for all that we want in one time frame. But I do think that, and I don't know whether we ought to add Doug Hoffer to this list or not.
I mean, if you set meeting dates and you as a board maybe talk over dinner, I think you have to decide, are you trying to get enough information to make a judgment about the state policy decision? I'd start with Andrew, and that may lead to a series of other questions, but.
There's also this January 1 question.
All right,
Which is why I try to get Andrew on the phone.
Well, I'm not sure we're gonna be in a position to make a decision after one conversation with him.
Why not? That's the point. We need education from a variety of sources.
This is dense stuff.
So I don't know what to suggest. Does anybody, I've said what I've said twice about, you know, getting a variety of perspectives.
You can have Andrew, you can have One Care, you can ask the Vermont Legal Aid to send someone. They've been very involved in this process.
Mike Fisher.
Mike Fisher, or his colleague Eric, either of them could come in and talk.
Okay. All right. I'll articulate a motion here somehow. I move to have the management staff arrange for, I don't know if the word is presentations. I'll say presentations about this issue from Andrew Garland at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont, a representative of One Care, and a representative from, I think it's called the Healthcare Ombudsman Office, which is within Vermont Legal Aid structure. Does that work as a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion right now, because we've got to eat and get on with the meeting?
If the motion's approved, I'm not sure how I would frame this to the healthcare ombudsman office.
I can
I
work
think
with
you
Andrew.
no, I think the board wants to figure out what you're asking them.
Well, I know you want that, but I'm not sure we can pull that off sitting here. I can try.
I don't think you
Something
want,
else.
since there's not uniform perspectives on management, that you wanna ask us to represent your invitation to that
Understood.
office. You should,
Understood. We
think
would
of that
like-
as a board.
We should have, I guess, from the healthcare ombudsman office. I mean, One Care is gonna present what One Care wants to present.
I think they would be, like to know exactly what you're looking for them to present. I
You know
think
what,
Andrew's presenting on his
So
memo.
let's figure it out.
I think the management team could come up with, hold on, just for a second, let me finish my thought. We can come up with an invitation, we can actually have a conversation with Joe and Tracy to see if they're okay with it.
Mark, we
We're
do not
saying
have
she's gonna
time for the
disagree.
two of us to come up with common language and get this on the books. I think the board needs to be clear what you want from these representatives if you invite them.
I
So
would
that
like
From the
to-
they're not
ombudsman, from the
infiltrating
ombudsman's
it.
office specifically.
And One
And One
Care.
Care.
I would like to know.
You might wanna think through dinner and then come back to it.
Well, I don't want us to have to come back to it, because we ought to get out of here at some point tonight, but,
I thought Mark had some valid points earlier about ACOs, how they work in other areas, what their history is, what their trends are, how they're
But you're
going.
not gonna get that from this
You won't get that
audience.
from the
These people don't
ombudsman.
No.
Okay, what is their specialty?
The
I-
Vermont Ombudsman's
Legal aid.
office is essentially the representative of, if you will, patients or consumers when it comes to healthcare.
How about this? Well, the basic question is, what are the implications of VEHI, I'll say permitting, because I don't know another way to say it, of VEHI permitting its pool of subscribers to be brought into the
All payer model.
all-payer model from the standpoint of the individual and the system, and the healthcare system? I don't know.
Yeah, based on your interactions or regulatory
Yeah, but
interactions
well,
with
it's whatever they
One Care.
come in here with. How's that? First attempt, last attempt? You know, we're all gonna live with the consequences of what I just suggested, so. Okay? Okay,
So
all
that's
in-
part of the motion.
That's
you're
part of the
okay with
motion?
Part of the motion. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
clarifying.
Actually, could you read the motion back? I'm sorry.
So Joel made a motion, seconded by Peggy, that management arrange presentations on this issue, about the One Care, which I have to think through, from Andrew Garland of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont, a representative of One Care, and a representative of the Healthcare Ombudsman Office, asking them to speak to what are the implications of VEHI permitting its pool of subscribers to be brought into the all-payer model, 1/1/20, from the standpoint of the individual in the healthcare system.
1120 was not part of the motion.
I know, Do you
I'll put a
care? You don't
motion.
care? I'll take that out.
Yeah,
As I read it, I thought maybe the implications are different. And Blue Cross is,
well, then let them tell us that, I
Okay,
think,
good
because I
point.
don't know. I mean-
yep, let's forget that.
Okay, any further
Do
discussion?
you wanna wait for Tracy to be in the room?
Not particularly. She's not, okay.
I hear her.
Hey, Tracy.
She's gonna ask what the heck she's voting.
So Tracy, the motion to invite the 3 entities was clarified to, the question for the entities are to respond to what are the implications of VEHI permitting its pool of subscribers to be brought into the all-payer model from the standpoint of the individual in the healthcare system.
Got it? Good, it's as clear as it's gonna get for us all at this point. All in favor? All opposed? None. You have passed a wish list motion. Okay, let's eat and work on our calendars and make Jeff here. Jeff Fannin is here, I presume, for the next item, which is regarding the service agreement.
If you can give us a couple of dates, we could propose that, and you should also let us know if different entities that make different dates, do you want more than one meeting? And I'm assuming
Oh,
by
yeah.
phone, people can come
So
and
one of the
come.
things that they talked about
Okay.
was.
I mean,
the
over
in-breath
dinner,
I'm
right?
with you.
There was
All right.
in one quarter.
Because I'm thinking if you want this, not
284
next week, because it's Thanksgiving week,
for
but it could be
children,
as early as the week after
who
that.
had
I agree.
behavior
And it
issues
should
at
be
school.
within the
And
the
so
first 2
they
weeks of
recognized
December.
This is not an
Yeah,
appropriate
because we'll never go
of
meeting
right.
otherwise.
We should
Not
try to
an
get that
appropriate place for
invitation
a
out
child, you know.
before
So they
Thanksgiving,
worked with a mental health,
Got it.
right?
Yeah.
What is it,
Right, so we
Thursday?
not the institution, but center, to come up with a family room. So instead of bringing
There
their
are no
child to the
dates, that's just
ER if they
the
were
rate
having
there.
issues, they would go there and invite the family in and they would have counseling.
Doesn't
and
have to
they
be
did.
an
So that was part of what
Although,
one
if you're
did.
not
And those
traveling,
are
I
some
don't
of
know
the things
if
that
they have
they
I'm
look
sorry,
at.
I
I just
spending
said I'd be,
tens and tens
like,
of thousands of dollars on visits.
my
There's
life
kids
is
who
nuts,
just need,
other than next
you know,
Monday and
visit with
Tuesday,
their
because
family.
nobody else wanted to have meetings next week.
Right.
Once that's over,
So the first 2 weeks in
I support
December,
that.
no
Yeah.
evening.
Fridays,
and
Saturdays,
Yeah,
and
no.
Sundays.
respect you, but I
And I'm telling you, you want to, my calendar's right there, you're welcome to look at it.
We trust you.
We're
Well,
talking
here's the
about,
thing.
we're talking about bargaining, we're
All right,
talking
here's the
about,
thing. I'm willing.
into this one so fast
well, let's see what everybody
that
else
you're
says.
not looking in the right direction.
We could have a one Friday night, if all 3 could accommodate us on the same
Well,
night.
that'd be.
We could have one care for an hour, Andrew Garland for an hour, and Mike Fisher for an hour.
Yeah, that'd be like
the
professional
HRA or
learning
HSA,
credits or whatever.
Right.
contribution was
So
about
what do you think?
75%.
Yeah.
And it ended up being, it was then bargained at more like 95%. So the rate they,
Was anything more gonna be
Blue
accomplished?
Cross went in saying,
We just
oh,
have to
okay,
decide
we're
on
gonna do
January 1,
75%,
because
that
we
means
don't
that
do anything,
people
we're
will
going
act
out
this
January
way,
1.
you know, this is what we think.
And we can do
And
that
then
over
when
dinner,
it
we
was
can talk
bargained
about
much
that.
higher, it just.
Otherwise,
blew
if we're,
up. I do
we're
agree
headed
the
for
last couple of years, it's like, seriously, we're not
It's
really.
hard.
It's been good, it's been beautiful,
But
but.
all the phone calls and like John's one, he said how many he dealt with, I don't know how big his district is, but I've got almost 500 members in my district and I dealt with them all too, because everyone had multiple problems, so I was.
Jeff, you eat?
Yeah.
I did. Sorry, thank you though. I don't need to eat again, sure.
Like, I could,
A cup of coffee to keep me awake.
you know, so you understand.
How do you?
Well, so I do appreciate your no, and that's, I mean, it's helpful to more of the picture, just because, I mean, we literally could learn more, like, all we have.
Really? I have zero time every single night, right up to Christmas.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. But
Negotiations prep, board meetings, meeting an outstanding teacher ceremony. Already conflicting with other stuff, I have to go, I mean, you know.
I find a reason not to, unless I was not with that, I think I would.
I guess,
So am I supposed to be looking at my calendar while?
yeah. Yeah, just don't respond the way Penn Awful did.
Yeah.
Yeah. we complete our dinner, I just want to say that we have successfully scheduled a meeting for December 20th to continue our discussion and hear presentations regarding the quote, one care reimbursement, unquote, matter. And that's all. The next item on the agenda, item 10, is a discussion of criteria for decisions regarding service agreements, including consideration of the proposal that's in our materials from Vermont EA, as well as, I should have said, the memo from Fran on the issue of the criteria. Fran, can I yield to you and have you start us off?
Sure, to be honest, this goes back to August. As my note says, my understanding is we have two service agreements, one with Visbit, one with Vermont NEA. And I have listed here 5 sort of concerns or questions I have, and I'm not sure who gives me the answers. You want me to read them, or does everybody have it?
They're in your materials.
Everybody have it?
It might take a second to.
Gotta find it.
While you're looking, Martha and Fran, you both invited me to a VEHI board meeting on the 20th, so you wanna
Oh.
be careful when you put things in your phone that you're not like inviting everybody. Cause then my calendar gets all messed up and I have to actually invite it and schedule it along, so. You know how your phone like thinks it's smarter than you and
Yeah.
does more than you want?
Oh,
So it's not your fault, it's your phone,
well, I see, it went to all of you.
yes.
Whoops.
So that makes it hard for us to book this room and stuff, because my calendar gets confused, so thank you.
So I should delete that. And you will send us an invite.
So as I read Fran's memo,
Well, I can just,
you're not asking for answers so much as seeking to establish these
Yeah.
elements as a part of our
as I
consideration.
said, I'd like, yeah, in terms of how we look at these agreements, to show a clear explanation of the services expected and provided, clear explanation of criteria we would use to decide if expectations are being met. Criteria we use should reflect the basic principles of fairness. Obviously, each agreement is for different services, but the basic parameters for assessing effectiveness and quality of service should be on par. We need to adhere to a principle or standard that has paying for actual cost of service. And we need to make sure that the costs of service are clearly enumerated. I think we need understandable language defining the services sought, services rendered, or acceptance, that each agency has met a standard of expectation, perhaps due diligence, that our standards must be straightforward, fairly, or equitably applicable to all entities contracted to serve VEHI. And then if we have a criteria that inform our decision, then we are in a better place to review service agreements, review requested changes, et cetera. Without criteria, we run the risk of being inconsistent, arbitrary in our decisions. So those were my thoughts on the matter.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Response?
I was thinking that we have contracts for services, we have more than 2. And those include Blue Cross Blue Shield, Delta Dental, Gallagher, and probably others. Remedy, and maybe legal services from time to time. And maybe other things I don't know about. Investigate. So I just wanted to put that out there.
I don't disagree. I think, Fran, I don't want to put words in your mouth. It seemed to me that you were thinking, though, in terms of the service agreements with Visbit and Vermont.
Well, those are the 2 that seem to be needing action.
Yeah.
At least that was true back in August. But But the criteria that we have would apply to any and all service agreements.
So,
John's looking.
well, we have a Visbon agreement that is executed and in place, do we not?
Yes, yes.
And, on that Visbon agreement, we get, there are audits done on the, I guess my question is, do we have a question about criteria for the Visbon agreement? Is there questions about what the criteria is for the Visbon agreement?
I think my question is, are we consistent with a principle across all, service agreements? Because if we've got, and I appreciate that different service agreements are for different services and therefore there need to be some changes, but I think they all need to rest on a basic principle that in any and all cases, we're being fair and equitable in terms of what we're expecting. So that there isn't a perceived or real inconsistency in how we approach any and all service agreements.
I agree with numbers 1, 2, 4, and 1, 2, and 4. And I agree that we should have, with the point in number 5, that we should have clear criteria in our service agreements. I feel that my duty is to VEHI and to get the best deal possible for VEHI, for the services that we need and we are clear about and we evaluate and hold our, the people we contract with accountable for. Language that says that we will pay the actual cost of service, for example, I think simply can't be in a policy or a procedure, because we don't. We don't with Delta Dental, we don't with Blue Cross Blue Shield. The structure of the contract itself determines the payment provisions, and our job is to get the best possible service we can for the best possible price. And of course, we want our service providers happy and to feel like they're well treated in order to maintain those strong, positive partnerships. So I just want to be really careful about any language that we put that inadvertently creates an expectation that's either not being followed or shouldn't be followed on a case-by-case basis.
I don't disagree with that. I think there's a provision though in the Visbon agreement that calls for VEHI to pay the cost as determined by VEHI.
And a truing up
As
process.
Visbon, as determined by Visbon.
Well, I guess part of my, and I wasn't, I mean, this is just sort of my thinking when I put it out there, that it wasn't gonna be adopted into some policy or something, but the conversation is, what, do we all sort of agree, what would a contract look like that would be sort of fair? And I'm not sure how to articulate it. I'm not even sure I would kind of know if I saw it. I just, I just feel that there needs to be some kind of basic criteria or standard that we would use for, I guess, analyzing and looking at a contract to know that we're being as fair with A as we are with B as we are with D. Understanding that the situations are different in terms of what our contracts are for, but that there still be certain principles in play.
Clarification, the language in the Visbon agreement we have is that the payment shall be adequate to cover Visbit's cost of carrying out the services and obligations of this agreement.
Yeah, and there's a process where it's trued up, I just noticed it in the financials we reviewed earlier, that actually this one gave us money back this year.
It comes and goes.
But in terms of quality, let's say, or is what we asked to be done, to me,
Basic.
well, the Visbit agreement, I mean, you know, they get an audit. They get more than one audit, right? And that determines, are they performing the duties are primarily fiscal, are they not? I mean, they're
Fiscal and
administrative.
DFR does an administrative audit, Sullivan and Powers does a fiscal audit.
And so there are audits to say, is
There's
that done to
wellness, we don't have an
satisfaction?
outside audit for wellness.
No, we've done a board review.
You mean Visbit has an audit, is that what you mean?
I don't remember what I said, but yes, that's what I meant.
But no, VEHI is audited.
No, VEHI has.
That's what I.
yes.
VEHI is
That's why I
audited
asked.
also.
Well,
By
It's
DFR
audited too,
and
yeah.
by Sullivan and Powers. Annually by Sullivan and
I
Powers
know,
and by DFR. VEHI specifically.
forgive me, but I don't, you're right, I don't understand the point then. VEHI is, it's not VEHI's audit that you were concerned about.
Well, I think VEHI's audit, if Visbit is performing fiscal and administrative services for VEHI, which is what the service agreement calls for, no? And VEHI gets a fiscal audit and an administrative audit, then that is a, I don't know if you would call it a criteria, but is a measure by which is Visbit performing for VEHI
It's at least evidence.
adequately what they were contracted to do.
Okay, and so the suggestion is that.
Well, I don't have, I guess my question, I'm not sure I understand kind of the fairness piece and concept, but in terms of, I guess I'm asking, I don't understand why we're talking about the Visbit service agreement. That's what I don't understand. It, other than from a, whatever you wanna call it, the concept of fairness, and I'm not sure I understand that, but I understand you bringing it up as all the contracts should have some level of fairness in it.
Tracy, let me ask you something. You said that the people we contract with should be happy and well treated, so that we have a strong and solid partnership, where it's close to that. How would you, how could that be worded in a formal sense, do you think?
That we seek to maintain positive working relationships with our service providers or our contractees.
I'm not writing anything down,
Yeah,
I just
don't
assumed
know.
that if we were to write something down, we wouldn't say happy.
No.
Although it might be the best term to use.
No, and you know, what's an indicator of positive working relationships, I don't know.
Yeah.
But Blue Cross Blue Shield certainly wants to make a little money off of us, but we also wanna get the best deal possible.
Well, as I said, this issue goes back to August. And it came about because there was discussion and concern that, in our case, Visbit had a sort of automatic turnover to a renewal of the service contract.
Yep.
And yet the Vermont NEA contract didn't, and there seemed to be issues. And so in my mind, it raised, why do we, give one service contract this sort of over, this, they can turn over a year, and the other one, we don't. And if somebody can explain to me
Simple.
why it's set up that way, because to me, that sort of just reeks of inequity.
Visbit asked for it. Vermont NEA did not ask for it as part of contract negotiations.
Well,
And it
see-
does appear in this.
See, that's where I guess my sense of fairness is, okay, if we're gonna do it, then maybe we should be deciding whether it makes more sense that that we have automatic turnovers, or certain deadlines when they have to come back in for review. Just because one group asks for it and the other one doesn't, doesn't mean that we shouldn't have some sense of where there should be some equity.
And if the board at the time had thought of it, maybe they would have asked. It certainly didn't emerge as a board priority at the time. I can assure you that Vermont NEA was well represented at the table at the time the Nisbet contract was renewed.
She better. I'm kidding, it's me, I was there.
Or Jeff, I can't remember.
It was me.
It's all a blur.
Well, it depends
Oh,
which
yeah.
year you're
Well,
talking
which
about.
year?
It was
You're talking about the
extreme.
Bisbit one. I
Vermont
was-
NEA was extremely well represented.
Sorry, Jeff.
On an annual basis in multiple ways, and some ways better than others. And
Stop while you're way ahead for the cookie, will you?
maybe I should go get a cookie and stop
Can
talking.
you give back half of this cookie?
I think I can get one. But really, that's what the history is.
Okay, I guess
There's more history to it than that, and I don't think we gotta spend a long time, but Laura informed me about the history in January. And basically, it stemmed from Lisbeth's concern that in the changeover before Act 11, the prior changeover, Nisbet was all of a sudden without any representation on this board, and felt, I guess a proper term would be insecure about it. It's an improper term, it's my term then. It felt as though it wanted to see some measure of, well, security in its long-term relationship. I don't know if that's the right, I'm looking for a noun, it's late in the day as you know, but that's the idea. And so we ended up with a 5-year agreement with 2 self-renewing 3-year extensions. Pretty special. And we're in the first year of the first 3-year extension. And John, I think the reason that the juxtaposition is between the Lisbon agreement and the Vermont NEA's agreement is because that's the way this discussion has gone for years. I don't know that we've ever had a serious discussion about almost any other conduct. I don't mean to say that, that's not what I mean. We haven't had real issues associated with
Other
those kinds of contracts. Even- I'm sure that understates it in some way, but
yeah, I think
they're
this,
in a different
Do
category.
any of those have auto renew?
I don't believe so.
Yes,
Some
well,
do.
yes, some do.
Okay.
Some don't. It varies, just like.
Yeah, and I do not mean to be interpreted as saying there's something fundamentally wrong with.
Correct. Understood.
And SDAP is actually perpetual. Remedies 3 years, Gallagher's 2 years. There are auto renews that we have to prevent from triggering.
Well, there you go. Well,
I guess this is as much to sort of inform, because apparently we do have to, do we need to be renewing a service agreement with Vermont NEA?
I'm
Or
sorry, say again?
Yes, Vermont NEA's
Yeah.
agreement. Is
the
actually
service
going
agreement with Vermont NEA needs to be
Re-up.
It
re-upped,
has not
right?
been re-upped.
It has not been.
It
It's
has not.
expired.
Right,
Expired June 30.
that would explain,
But it's been implemented on the same terms, which is what the board agreed. So it's not suspended, but it has not been actively at that point.
so I think that's sort of where my big concern is like, okay, we have to, this is before us for renewal. We should be looking at it with this, in a way that's fair and equitable with the way we would look at any service agreement.
All right. I'm not sure there's action called for in that discussion. Is it all right to move on to consideration of Vermont proposal? Going once, going twice. Would it be appropriate to recognize Jeff to take us through the proposal? Is that all right? Any objections?
Join you.
I guess come on up here.
It's supposed to be the morning, but it's not quite that far.
Good evening. So there's nothing hidden here. I think everybody has the, I don't know.
I should,
It's in the material.
Yeah, I couldn't find, it's not on the website. So anyway, my memo was just an effort to put in writing for your sake and our clarity that what we're trying to do is reestablish what was, let's say, a way to reimburse and pay Vermont EA for its services provided to VEHI in a manner consistent with the way it had been on a percentage basis, understanding that Mark's time, largely Mark Page's time, is devoted to VEHI. And it's been significant, particularly over the last several years, as the transition to the new plans has occupied a greater and greater amount of his time. And so I just had our business manager, we keep time sheets for the U.S. Department of Labor reporting requirements, LM2 as it's known. And Mark presented his time was equal to about 90.07 devoted to VEHI. The request is for 85% in this current fiscal year, followed by 90 and 90. In years past, as I point out in the memo, there was some of my time, some other people's time at Vermont and EA who were reimbursed as well, a portion of their time. We're not seeking that now. It's not part of this proposal at all. Just what is it, in addition to the 90 or 85% from Mark's time, is some of his expenses that we incur as part of his job of working for VEHI and doing work for VEHI. And currently we have a one-year agreement that has to be renewed annually. What we're asking for is a 3-year agreement consistent with VISBIT's 2 3-year auto renewals, I guess it is. This would just be a 3-year agreement. It does provide some stability for us, frankly, for VEHI as well. And since we're about halfway through this fiscal year, I guess it would just be really 2.5 years at this point. Nothing other than what's in the memo. And happy to answer and entertain any questions. This is what we do. Mark's time has been significantly devoted to VEHI, helping members. I know Bobby, Joe, and Mark have worked on particular folks. It's been, a challenge the last 18 months for Mark. A lot of VEHI time.
Martha.
So, by taking Fran's information here, saying, we need clear explanation of the services expected, clear explanation of criteria we should be using to decide, of the expectations if they're being met or not. My questions, and I wrote them down because I knew I would get lost here. So what process does the Vermont NEA use to determine whether, let's say, a healthcare related question or issue is a VEHI business versus a union level business? For example, the NEA's April 2019 self-evaluation references Mark's work with members experiencing affordability issues. In the NEA's view, are members' concerns regarding whether they can afford prescription out-of-pocket costs based on what was negotiated at the bargaining table really VEHI business? You were saying here in your memo here that he spent like 90% of his time working on VEHI matters, but what do we have as evidence that this is VEHI work?
I think the Mark is required by Vermont EA to document his time. So the timesheets that Mark submits on a weekly or every other week basis document his work on behalf of VEHI. It is a judgment call on Mark's part that it's actually VEHI work as opposed to union work. But it is, I think first question, if you could repeat that, Martha, I'd appreciate it.
So what is used, what criteria do you use to determine whether it's VEHI work or it's union work when it comes to members
for-
asking for healthcare related questions, especially like out-of-pocket costs, if it's affordable for them or not, based on what was negotiated at the negotiation table?
Well, I think the 90%, you know, my conversations with Mark over the last 18 months have been related to the troubles largely with future planning.
Which
That's-
was not a VEHI issue.
Well, no, I'm sorry.
Let Mark,
Let me give you an example that I hope will answer your question about this demarcation between union and VEHI work, which quite honestly, in most cases, is pretty muddy, right? Because we get a call from someone who can't afford medication. And in fact, that was the first major call we got right after the transition. So what happens in that case? Is that a union call? Is it a VEHI call? That, as far as I'm concerned, is a member in trouble call. When I say member, I mean a VEHI member as well as a union member. They're calling me because I'm the VEHI representative. As soon as I get the call, I email Bobby Joe, Laura, and Allison Plant. And then we all swing into action as a VEHI team to try to figure out what we can do, if anything, for that particular member. So there's an example of how helping someone through the, in that case, an affordability issue, is a VEHI assignment as much as anything else. Or we get calls from hundreds of people or emails looking for assistance with TPA crisis. And that is as much a VEHI responsibility as it is anything else that I do. So anytime someone calls the office looking for assistance and it's a healthcare matter, it comes straight to me. And virtually every call has some kind of VEHI component. And in fact, many of the questions that come to me from the retirement system, from both retired members and Vista staff, is a VEHI matter. Because it concerns VEHI plans and they're looking for expert advice and guidance, in this case from a trust administrator. I hope that's helpful.
Can I piggyback on that for a minute? So are you taking calls in that context from VEHI members who are
None.
Vermont NEA members or VEHI members
Any
who are
call-
not Vermont
Good
NEA
question.
members?
Any call I get about a healthcare matter that has a VEHI component, that's, again, what most of the calls are. I don't ask about union affiliation. So anyone who calls me and needs help with a VEHI plan issue gets that help.
And non-members would call Vermont NEA?
That is correct. One of the longest calls I took this year was from an administrator who needed assistance because
Is that
of,
Michael? No,
that
just-
wasn't your who had a particularly difficult issue because of the medical condition he suffered from. And he needed a complex, he had a complex set of questions about a medical device that I could only answer. I think Bobby Joe may have been part of this call, so one conversation, but anyways, I needed to go through Blue Cross so that they could talk to some of their people, get back to me, and help with this particular individual. I don't ask about union affiliation when calls come in, because as far as I'm concerned, anytime a school employee calls me, and the great majority, no doubt, will be union members, but I do not ask about union affiliation.
so the great majority of teachers are.
And in fact, most retired members who call me are not union members,
Yeah.
and they get assistance, because I feel like that's what they're owed.
And
And that's what Visitors is owed.
And like, you know, presentations that you do, like you came to Barry with Bobby Joe and Laura and do presentations.
Correct.
Do you do presentations specifically to Vermont NEA member groups?
So regional bargaining councils have asked me to come in during the transition period to essentially reprise the kind of presentation that you saw us do in Barry, or to ask specific questions about the plans, because our focus early on was getting information from bargaining teams on both sides of the equation so that they could begin to handle the transition from the bargaining perspective. So yes, I do talk to bargaining teams as well as room full of school employees who are invited by your district, for example, or Tracy's, or Martha's, to speak on VEHI plans.
But also in my time prior to these plans, as a regional bargaining council member, chair, whatever, you spend time at those, again, that to me would feel like it was outside of VEHI work.
It depends on what the subject is, right?
Correct.
So if I'm being asked to come in and talk about the plans, and out-of-pocket costs, and HRAs, and HSAs, and FSAs, and the timing of the transition, and TPAs, that's all VEHI work.
So you're saying that some of the time that you would spend at union-specific things like regional bargaining councils is part of that 90%?
That is correct. If they, my subject matter is VEHI work, VEHI plans, VEHI transition, VEHI problems, then that's a trust administrator job. In the same way that I assume Bobby, Joe, and Laura are asked to go into a VASBO meeting and address business managers' concerns around all these issues. We don't have field staff. VEHI doesn't have field staff, right? So the only way to get to most of these people is through the local union structure, in addition to the campaign monitors, any VEHI presentations that we do individually or as a team. But in order to make sure information gets out, that it's understood, we go to where the people are who are the best positioned to disseminate that information, or use it directly, in this case, as we're talking about, for bargaining purposes.
Let me play retired labor lawyer for a minute. Whatever audience of school employees or union members, Mark, or anybody makes a presentation about this field of endeavor or some other issue, filters to all school employees, because the obligation, as you'll remember, of local unions is to represent members and non-members equally. Whether that happens is not, that's a
Well, that
different,
can be mud, I understand,
that's a different
I'm not
issue.
gonna disagree with you on that, what it,
yeah.
but I think it's also muddy, and I think you said this before, that when you're having those conversations, let's say in a union-specific meeting, and you're talking about parts that are information about the plans, and then it flows into, I don't wanna call it advice, but things that relate specifically to bargaining,
That's the UNICEF
that
director's
gets,
mode.
that
That's the
gets.
UNICEF director's mode. I'm not invited to a regional bargaining council except for the UNICEF. My job is to come in and do what the UNICEF director asks me to do, and that is talk about these plans. Any bargaining advice gets channeled through the UNICEF directors. I mean, let's also remember that this has been going on for 20 years. Right. I mean, this is, what I've been doing for 20 years, right? And again, I want to stress, when I get a call, my advice is not predicated on whether or not the person on the other end, or in front of me, person to person, is a union member.
So I wanna acknowledge that it's been going on for 20 years, but also acknowledge the change in the organization and the change in the structure of health plans. And what I think some members of the board, if not the board as a whole, has been trying to say is that the employee education piece needs revisiting and clarification and an update to expectations, so that we have a shared understanding of what we're expecting and how we see it's happen, how we get evidence of that. I understand now that I think my expectations personally are different from the 20 years of past practice. And it's been, the significance has increased in my mind, particularly with comments like Joel's and yours about the employee perception of VEHI is not positive. And the organization that's singularly charged, we only have one service agreement that touches employee education, and that's the contract with Vermont NEA. So my question is, how many trainings have, were done in the last year, maybe not this year, we can just think about the last contract year, for members, and what materials and resources are we using to train? And I'll follow that by saying, I didn't see anything in my system.
What did you ask?
I'd like to respond first, Tracy. You mischaracterized again what I have said over the last year. What I have said invariably when I have talked about the troubling reputation that VEHI is carrying is that the one piece of glue that is holding our reputation with school employees together is the services of Mark Page. So, I may not have said it every time, but I've said it on a number of occasions. So I guess you mischaracterized what I said, that's all. So Mark wanted me to say.
I want to spend a because you've raised it before. It's a fair question. You know the education work that was undertaken by the management team in 2015, 16, and 17, because that was reported out extensively. And you know that I was an integral part of all of that, both in terms of presenting and developing materials. I was everywhere I was asked to be. And since that time, once the transition went into effect, whenever I've been asked to go and talk about the plans, I will. But the last 2 years were overtaken by the TPA crisis. And what people wanted from us first and foremost was to help them resolve that. They weren't asking us in large numbers to come in and reprise the presentations that we did in 2016 and 17. Now, when I was asked to do that, I did do that. And I think I gave an example in my evaluation document that I helped in St. Johnsbury set up a presentation at the request of the local union and I think the central office to once again help them understand the plans, how they related to HRAs and HSAs and FSAs. So no one has ever been denied training that's been requested. The last 2 years, though, as you know, have been a struggle to work through the TPA crisis. And whenever there was a request, my apologies for redundancy, for anything other than that, it was provided. If we want to talk about a different kind of educational curriculum, right, at this point in time, and I think that's an appropriate word in this context.
Yes,
And given that we will have a statewide bargaining agreement in a month's
that
time,
would be my follow-up.
and we are talking about potentially a shifting in TPA services as well. And coming out of the VEHI annual meeting, we were asked questions about what it is we're talking about, what it is we may be doing shortly, are we thinking about this new transition coming up? There is no question in my mind, and I think I speak for Laura and Bobby Joe on this, that we will have yet another major educational challenge before us, and the management team will be the vanguard of that effort, as well as, I hope, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont, and perhaps more pointedly, whatever new TPA may be in the field. So the education effort is going to be re-engineered, recalibrated in light of what we've been through over the last 2 years, in light of a new bargaining agreement, and again, very soon, I think, probably another TPA option for school districts to consider. So I don't think you have anything to worry about in terms of education. I think that's going to be a major focus moving forward.
If I was interpreted as suggesting that the work of Laura and Bobby Joe doesn't contribute to a good reputation, I apologize, I didn't mean to exclude you, but I just want you to know that Mark Hage is the voice and face of VEHI for Vermont NEA's people, primarily.
And Martha, when I pick up the phone or I'm in a meeting, and I'm in a VEHI context, I don't bifurcate that in my mind as union and VEHI. My immediate focus is on what is the problem, why am I here, what do you need from me? And to the extent I need Lauren and Bobby Joe's assistance, or Allison Plan at Blue Cross, or we have to shake the rafters at Data Path or anywhere else, then that's what we do. But the first thing that goes through my mind is what's the problem and how can I help? And again, I do not ask for union affiliations when that call comes in.
I have to apologize to Chris, she was one of the way in a
Well,
long
it
time
may
ago.
be past that point.
I'm
I just
sorry.
have to get, this is my left brain stuff coming out, but I do wanna make one
We don't get to use
clarification.
it enough.
I know, not often enough. Oftentimes I hear us talk about VEHI members, you refer to VEHI members. What you're referring to actually is subscribers. Members
Yes,
of
our school
VEHI,
district.
We know that.
VEHI members are school
We know
districts,
that.
Right.
not subscribers.
Thank you, you're right.
And I think that is a distinction though, and an important distinction about who we serve.
It is, and so it would be easier if,
So-
in this, that's a very helpful distinction, but if we were to rewind and Mark were to substitute the word subscribers, and you were to make the distinction between subscribers who are union members and
Correct.
subscribers who are not, it might have been clearer. Martha, I want to make a comment about the notion of this, of checking into the percentage allocation, and it relates to Fran's suggested principles. if I remember right, there are 10 Visbit employees, portions of whose time are allocated to the service of the 7. Does that include the wellness folks?
Yes.
There were 10 the last I saw. Okay, Chris says 7, I don't.
Well, 7 FTEs, I'm sorry. 7 FTEs.
That's my.
But
That's
there's
where it's
5
7.
people who
Wait, I'm
share.
speaking, that's precisely my point.
Mhm.
Precisely my point. There are 10 Visbit employees, portions of whose time
Mhm.
are allocated without any question, to my knowledge, ever having been raised in this room. I'm not raising a question in this room about it. Portions of whose time is never questioned, the accuracy of which has never been questioned here. Your question focuses exclusively on Mark Page, because he's the, I'm not, you don't need to respond, you can, but you don't need, I'm just
I would like to
pointing out the
respond
distinction.
because all of the evaluations and supposedly evidence that we get from Vermont NEA is Mark. That's all we get. This
That's
is
all
what I
you-
did
that's all
all
you-
year,
that's all
you
we
know,
pay
a
That's
a
what you're-
narrative.
That's what you're paying for.
That's all we're paying
Criteria,
for.
right.
That's what you're paying for.
So the materials we have raises questions about what the filters are.
Right.
Okay, so what are we supposed to do, folks? Fran, Meg, Peg,
Hey.
Anyways,
I don't know what's going on
It's getting late.
upstairs here.
what I'm hearing, and certainly folks can say differently afterwards, but what I'm hearing is that we have VEHI members and VEHI subscribers that need education and that need assistance on a regular basis. I think that Vermont NEA has been providing that. I support this proposal that they've given to us to continue to provide those services. Bobby Joe spoke earlier about 250 cases you settled or something. If it wasn't Vermont NEA, we'd be hiring somebody else at a large cost to try to provide education and assistance. They have a network that's in place that allows us to really confirm that they're in contact with a lot of people. And so I do support the proposal that's put forth here. The conversation about criteria and evaluations is one that started a while ago, and we as a board have not moved forward in creating any of those documents. So I think that that should be put aside, and that if that's something we deem important, that we should create those documents on what we want for an evaluation. I think that's up to us.
I agree completely and have been asking for a
That's what
long
we've been
time.
wanting
So
to
then-
do.
I move that we accept this proposal from Vermont NEA as written, and I don't know if it has to be a second one or if we put it in. Should I stop there, or just say that the board will create evaluation documents later? I don't know. That's my motion, to accept this proposal as written.
I second.
With the evaluation document.
Is it best to do it that way, or does I need some advice?
Are we in discussion?
Yes,
Friendly,
I second.
friendly,
I second
Why
so
don't you
on
leave it
discussion.
as the proposal and then move to discussion and see if there's
So,
some friendly.
Move to accept the Vermont NEA proposal as written by Peggy, seconded by Fran.
Correct.
Thank you.
Now we're just.
John,
So, I guess what I'm questioning is really around the amount of increase, the amount, the peg to marks. Those are the things I'm trying to get clarification on, and again, I am new to this, but it would seem to me, and I realize, I'm not saying there's not gonna be a lot of education to happen coming up. But I think a very complicating part of the education early on, which I would say it sounds like what we're hearing in the proposal is really was one of the factors that ramped up the amount of time that Mark ends up spending on VEHI, had to do with the fact that he was trying to educate on, as was Laura and Bobby Joe at some level. You might have one of these 400,000 permutations on what a settlement would be, and this is how it would impact you, and trying to help employees understand that. So that took a lot of time, and, you know, then it was, we have, you know, this issue around third-party administrators. And as Mark said, that took an awful lot of cleanup. Now, I don't wanna say all that's 100% behind us. I don't wanna say we're not still smarting from the pain of that. Again, you know, I live it as a subscriber, and I live it as a member because I have 600 employees. And I'm the one that, in the end, when the complaints get big, that hears it. And I can't tell you how much of my HR department's time, my business department's time, my time has been spent on all this. I'm concerned that now we will be paying more. At some level, that relates to more chance for a higher increase in rates because it factors into VEHI's expenses. And I just want to be sure that it is warranted based on those numbers, because I guess my question is, we're saying it's 90.7% of his time by the measures, and certainly some of it's muddy, but we acknowledge he does a lot of work, and it's hard to determine what's VEHI and not. But, you know, is it gonna stay that high, or should there be reason for it to go down? What did it used to be before we came into the last few
Well, I think
years and all that kind of
Can
stuff?
I
Was it
respond?
less than 90.7%?
Joel, can I respond?
Yeah.
Because what I was thinking of in my motion is what's about to be.
Mhm.
With our statewide contract and everything else that'll be happening in the next year plus. So I think that there will be an increased level that will keep Vermont NEA busy. And also in line with what Rob Halpert was saying earlier about not questioning the person. I don't question Vermont NEA, I believe that their numbers are legit. We can put something in place if we want some other type of evidence later, but I believe that it's been at 90.7%, they're asking for 85% for this year, and still going up to 90. They've already crossed that threshold of 90% and they're not asking for that. So that was part of my thought process in saying that this is a reasonable request.
Well, and I understand that. I'm not necessarily in agreement with you that the work will ramp up from what the work has been. I'm not leaving it out of the question. I think there's certainly a lot of uncertainty there. But I don't necessarily think that's gonna be the case. But I would still go back to my question of what was the standard for his time previously, if there was
I
one?
will tell you, we used to pay Vermont NEAs $275,000. That changed because there were complaints in this room about allocating any portion of the time of UNICEF directors to purveying information. Primarily, there were other aspects of communication, administrative overhead, the kinds of things, frankly, that VISBIT charges for are not even in this proposal. We've been paying them $191,000 flat for a couple of years.
Well, that I knew, that part of it I knew.
But that was not based on a percentage. I mean, I think Tracy would say it is based on a percentage of Mark's time at 80%, but it's really not accurate. The upshot for me is, and I wanted to add one more feature to your concern over the effect on VEHI finances. It's about a $20,000 difference that Vermont EA seems to be proposing here over $191,000. I'm not sure I can do this in my head, but we know that $2.5 million translates to 1% on premium. Whatever the fraction is, 20,000 over 2.5 million. We're talking, I think, about less than a tenth of 1%. I think. Chris, you can feel like changing that. You can do it.
Close enough.
But
he gets the point.
You know, and it's not even a rounding error for purposes of what we typically do in this room.
Understood, but it also, when I do the numbers, it's an 11% increase on the current, what the
Yes, and
previous
if you do
contract
the numbers,
is.
it's also a substantial decrease over the standard that used to be in place. So I understand that. I will tell you this, as the chairman of this group, for however long I have this distinction, we better resolve this. Time's way past when we should have resolved this very simple matter. If the three of you really distrust Mark Hage that much in his assertion of what he does, say so and tell us what percentage you're willing to live with. If you don't have a basis for suggesting that 90.07% is not an accurate reflection of his calendar year 2019 work on behalf of VEHI, I don't know where you go. What is it you want to do?
Well, I want to make a distinction and take some level of exception to what you just said, but I have to ask a question first. Is someone else smelling burning paper, or is it just me?
Yeah, I think it's the things out there.
You think it's
The
what?
stereo
The heater, the flame underneath the food.
I'm looking around, I don't see anything.
I smell it too.
Yeah.
It's not,
is the flame underneath
it's the flame.
Okay.
Yeah. That cream's burned off.
Well, I have to say, and with all due respect, there's a huge difference between asking questions to make sure to understand, especially with an increase,
Fair enough.
and distrusting, and separating a person from a function and a position. So I
I
you
will,
know,
let me
I
respond
have all
briefly to
respect
that.
for everybody involved.
I appreciate that. That said, the level of question, the degree of questioning about the accuracy of what Mark has asserted and what Vermont in line has asserted has been, the nature of his workload has been challenged incessantly in this room for the year that I have since returned here. I don't think anybody can disagree with that legitimately, so forgive me for,
Well, this was my first time doing it.
forgive me then for lumping you, but
Mhm.
it just, there comes a point where it feels like it's way different from a simple question of whether Mark is providing the services he has told us he is providing.
Can I speak
And
up?
I hope to God that we can resolve this amicably and move on to the stuff that we actually all agree about. Mark,
I just wanted to.
and then Tracy, did you want to, I apologize.
No. I want to just expand on the characterization of my work today. I don't disagree with how you characterized pre-transition and post-transition in terms of the workload, problems that had to be addressed. But in addition to all of that, like Bobby, Joe, and Laura, have been very central to the whole cost and quality initiative that we launched. In fact, that was really, I was the point person on all of that, and that took an enormous amount of time. All of the OneCare work that I consider VEHI Trust Administrator work is also something that I consider part of my workload. So it's fair to look at what came before the transition, it's fair to look at what's coming post statewide bargaining and the new TPA scenario, but it's also fair to consider that there's a host of other projects that go on here that haven't actually gotten as much time as they deserve, that I'm also involved with, and that also feed into that time.
And I guess I have to, unfortunately, Tracy, not throw your words, but use your words back. There is an aspect to this discussion that has to do with keeping people happy and feeling well treated. And that's been that's been the stick in my craw, if that's what it is,
Yeah.
that's not it. Tracy?
So I want to thank Jeff for the memo and appreciate that we got it and that I can tell that there's thought and effort and a commitment to figuring out how to move forward positively as a service provider in partnership with Vermont NEA. And I want to apologize if the questions that I've asked make someone feel that they aren't trusted or valued. I very desperately want it understood that I think subscriber education, employee education is a huge need that we have not done a good enough job at. And I want to see that improved, and I want to see Vermont NEA take a lead role in that. And for me, that means talking about ways or articulating ways that that happens differently than it has for the last 20 years. And it means making sure that it's unquestionably, and I'm not saying that it's not, but maybe transparently, universally accessible to all, the education and the access opportunities. For me, just as a good management piece, it's critical that the criteria for delivering on a contract be articulated as part of the contract, not after the fact. And by the way, since for several years this board has expressed an interest in better articulating the criteria for BizBit service agreement.
Without ever questioning the quality of work, the time commitment, or the nature of the work.
Not true at all.
Okay.
Totally disagree.
Or the-
But we've been
or the
asking.
amount of money involved.
Not true either.
Okay,
But,
I'd be interested
but
in
we
testing it
definitely
later.
want, and hopefully we'll get to, because now VisBid is asking as well for a more articulated scope of services, and
Yes.
hopefully we'll get to that.
Right.
So, my primary, and I certainly wouldn't enter into a 3-year agreement without the criteria defined. It just would not be good business practice. So, I'm on board for articulating clearly the criteria. I hope we can get really clear about employee education and deliverables. Recognizing that there isn't an employee education audit firm.
Right.
You know, so we're gonna find our evidence and our affirmation in other ways, but I'd be delighted to have that conversation, and have been eager to have it for years.
By the way, I personally don't have any question about the quality or the amount of money associated with the VisBid agreement. Yes. Jeff?
So, I think Tracy alluded to something like this, and I thought I should respond. I think necessarily because of the single statewide contract for healthcare, we are going to lead Vermont EA, Mark, if you will. We'll have to change how and alter how we interact with schools and school employees. I'll keep it simple that way, and won't say it any other way, so we're all straight about that. And that is and will have to happen. I get it, and Mark is going to be a lead person for Vermont EA and VEHI in doing that work. There's nobody more trusted amongst the school employees than Mark H. And I think that's significant and important to know. And the other thing is, with regard to Mark's time, largely a factor that, a report to the U.S. Department of Labor. If we're to lie on that, that's fraud, it's a federal crime, and I think that the numbers we come up with in 90.07 are based on that and driving towards that. That's why we're doing it, to keep track of our time, we're required to, more or less, and so that's what we do, and it all gets reported to the USDOL.
Labor unions are under greater requirements in that regard than I think any other employers.
So, I mean, that's where all this is coming to, and hence, we didn't, John, try to go back to where we were 2016, I think it was the last year. It was 275, then it was struck down and went to 80% of just Mark and no other portion thereof. We're not seeking that again. I'm trying to be reasonable and understand that there is a difference in this room, certainly about Mark's work, but trying to recognize the good and valuable work that he does on behalf of everybody in this room and VEHI in general.
I'll bet you've actually participated in presentations by Mark over the years.
Well, by all of these folks, sure.
No, but I'm asking about Mark.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, this is not about Mark any more than,
Well, I thought it was
Rob
about-
Halper's conversations were about Laura before. It's about what are we getting for service, what is the right amount for that? That's what a contract is, and I guess, I have one more question, but I would just go back to my other piece before to say, I'm not asking any questions that are anywhere near as hard as the questions that I feel like I get asked by my board every time I have a board meeting.
Right.
And I don't take it personally, that's their job, so I hope no one's taking it personally here. And I won't say that I don't walk out of there sometimes feeling like, that was a pretty damn hard meeting, and I've gotta relax some, because there's a lot of, you get a lot there because people are working hard to try to do their job and be stewards of whatever it is they've gotta be stewards of. Do we have any record of what, and I know I was saying I don't think this is about the VisBid agreement, but now I'm gonna go back to the VisBid agreement. Is there some record of what the rate of increase of the VisBid agreement amounts have been?
Yeah, Chris could probably recite the last
No,
5 years.
not exactly, but.
But in 2014, the first year of the 5-year agreement was $820,000. This year, it's $1,033,000.
Something like that, yeah.
So you do the arithmetic.
So
it's about-
5
it's
years,
about a 4%
20%.
increase.
So we've added, and we've added
Slightly
2
less
staff members,
Slightly.
which the VEHI work.
But that doesn't matter for purposes of the question. I
Right.
understand, but it's about a 4%, a little less increase each year, I think.
Okay.
But Chris then comes in and provides the appropriate footnotes. There are reasons for the increase.
Right, and I understand more of the history now, but I'm still sitting with, again, 11%. And if I remember right, I think it was before I came in, but when I was looking at minutes that Laura gave me in training, there was a proposal on the table to do an increase on the 191 of something in the ballpark of 4%.
No, 2%, then 2.25, then 2.25, then 2.25, the initial was 2%. And that was rejected for whatever reasons that we can revisit if you'd like.
I don't need to revisit them, I'm just again trying to get my head around the history, so.
But I talked with your predecessor about what 11% looks like, or 30% looks like. My point of reference was not 191.
I understand that, yep.
Call the question?
The question has been called, I
Is that
think.
you, Fran? Fran, was that you?
Yes.
Except for anybody whose hand was up before she said so.
No, she called it.
Well, I'm hoping we can resolve this today.
The motion is to approve to
The proposal,
accept the Vermont NEA proposal as written.
yes, we haven't heard any amendments.
Well, you can't now because the question's been called.
Well, we can do whatever we want because we're not bound by Robert's rules. So let me, with your permission, Fran, ask, are there any proposed amendments to the proposed agreement? Seeing none. Tracy, are you thinking?
I'm just,
I can't tell if you're fidgeting or thinking or both.
yeah, well,
Okay.
I know what I think I'm gonna do for a vote, and I'm,
You want to explain your vote before you do it?
yeah, if you would let me. I am planning to vote no, because I'm not comfortable with a 3-year agreement, and I'm not comfortable with an agreement that doesn't have the scope of services better defined. And it saddens me to feel like I need to vote that way, because I do appreciate the step forward, and I think we're
All right,
making
let me ask you something.
progress,
Let me
but I
ask you
think that,
something
I just
directly.
think that's,
Who's responsible for putting together the scope of services? Vermont NEA?
I would love to see a employee education
I'm not
outline.
asking that. Who's
From
responsible
Vermont
for
NEA?
putting it together?
We could propose one and they could respond, Vermont NEA could respond, or Vermont NEA could propose additional detail. It can go either way.
Yes, we can go back and forth for a
We
long
can.
time.
What I'm most interested in is that, as I said before, the employee education plan, which I think we all.
See, if you have a specific need in mind though, I think it would help the entire group if you could articulate what that is instead of, it's like in my classroom when we go back and forth and they're trying to figure out what I want and I'm trying to figure out what they're saying. We're gonna be here forever. One of us
So
comes through.
I'd be happy to work on that and bring some bullets or some thinking points. In December.
Haven't we agreed tonight that there's
I
going to
don't
be a new
understand.
education curriculum that we have to develop as an organization? Not you to develop, with all due respect, it's not really your responsibility. It's
Thank
the
you.
responsibility of the management team to come up with this educational curriculum to face the challenges that are coming. We've all acknowledged that has to happen, right? But we haven't done it yet because there's a host of factors that make it impossible to do at this point. The education that's been requested in the past, it was always provided. No one ever asked for something and was denied it. It just hasn't happened.
So,
And if someone would point out to me where people were denied education when they asked it, it would be incredibly helpful to me.
Actually, that's really a good
Can
question.
I-
Martha, let me ask you,
No.
and John, and Tracy, and Peggy, and Fran, have you ever come across a person who has expressed frustration at not being able to attend an education session provided by Mark, or Bobby Joe, or Laura
No.
about the health plans? Ever?
I have.
Name who it was. Identify it, not by name, but give us something to work with.
I'm aware, and we've discussed it at this very board, that trainings have been offered and association leadership told people not to come. I have never seen a single piece of communication
All
from
right,
Vermont
let's just-
NEA that said that I, as a non-member, could call Mark for support. I have never seen education
Okay,
by
let
Vermont
me
NEA
make
other
it,
than that was
let me make
provided
an
jointly.
assumption. Let me make an assumption that Vermont NEA's array of local associations are not perfect.
That's-
Let me make that assumption.
Okay,
Vermont NEA does not control the behavior of its local associations. Vermont EA does control the behavior of its employees. Its employees, in this case, Mark, is obligated to do whatever we have said he's obligated to do around this table. And I don't know that there is any criticism being levied by you about Mark's work. If you think that Vermont EA should instruct Stowe or Mark, well, I guess it's the Royal South Supervisory Union leadership about its obligation to make sure that presentations like this are open to all comers, say so. Why do we have to always bring it back to whether or not VEHI is willing to pay the cost of the services that no one doubts are being provided?
We've said so, and we've asked, this board has asked over multiple years for copies of presentation materials, information about where training, what trainings took
You have all our
place, when they
materials,
were.
you have all the materials we used in our presentations. You have every single one.
If I could just make a note here, I don't know what's happened in the past, in my district, which has a lot of issues, we haven't had problems getting the training that we needed for this last mess that we got into with the change in healthcare and the TA. When I'm looking at things going forward, what I'm seeing is lots more train wreck in this state when it comes to healthcare for people in the public schools. To me, it's let's get this contract with the Vermont NEA, so that's in place for when we gotta have people out there trying to unravel the mess that's gonna be coming down. If we don't have this contract, if we don't have things set, then we're gonna be in worse shape. I don't know, if you're having a problem with your local union as a former president, come talk to me. Go talk to your president of your local union if you don't think that you're hearing what you should be hearing or that things aren't open to everybody. But if my concern is that if we continue this, and this discussion's been going on for a year, we continue this harangue, when that decision comes down is it next month that the arbitrator comes in with the decision, we're all gonna be facing, I promise you, another train wreck if we don't have all our little ducks in order to try to help then have to deal with it. From everybody in the ground floor, which is where Vermont NEA education comes in, up into the higher rafters. So to say no to this, I think you've got your blinders on. I don't know what you think is gonna happen then, because Vermont NEA can just walk away, and then what do we do? As I said, when this decision comes down, and we've got umpteen thousand people that we're gonna have to help figure out what they're gonna be doing for healthcare.
Martha?
So, I think I wanna just clarify what Tracy is trying to say. We're not disagreeing with what is being presented as a proposal for a contract. To me, it's a proposal of a contract. It's not a contract, because if it's a contract, I'm gonna go back to what you say here, it needs clear expectations of criteria we should be used to decide if our expectations are being met. There's no criteria here, it's just saying, we're gonna provide. I think we just need.
The service agreement with us has criteria in it.
There's a formal service
Right,
agreement
it's a service
somewhere.
agreement with criteria, and if I wanna change that in the future,
Can we-
fine, but I need to know what I didn't do. Please tell me what I didn't do that you wanted done. And then we can have an intelligent conversation, otherwise I feel like
You know
I'm
what?
on trial constantly, and I don't know what the evidence is of my wrongdoing, or my
Tracy,
incompetency or negligence.
Before you respond, let me
I
just
think I need
suggest.
to take a break, because I'm not gonna be yelled at.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to yell at you, I just,
Personally attacked, I
I
understand
didn't mean to
this is
yell
a
at you, that
different-
wasn't yelling at you.
Tracy, let me
You
suggest.
did, you spit on me when you yelled at me.
I'm sorry, Tracy.
Sorry, you're
I
forgiven.
didn't mean to do that. I'm not actually angry so much at you.
I know.
I don't know what I didn't do. I want people to put it out for me. Show me what I didn't
You know,
do.
I've listened, I missed a couple of years, I guess, but I've heard no change in not the rhetoric's the wrong word, the words, the vocabulary being used to describe what Mark's experiencing. Every time we've talked about this service agreement, not some other service agreement, only this service agreement for some reason, the questions come up, and the inference that I used to draw from the question, and I think I proved off it a little bit as a result of tonight's discussion so far, is that it's a union issue. And that's how I just want you to know, that's how it has come across for several years. It's hard to let go of that inference that I've drawn over the years. And I gotta tell you, I supervised Mark for 16 years. I actually hired him into this position, although I think there was no doubt about that was gonna happen. He's got every reason to feel put upon. You can say it's not about Mark, but Mark's the only one who's doing this work for Vermont, and he's got a right to be upset. And so, my hope, against hope, was that a far diminished proposal out of Vermont, in the name of compromise, would lead to some fellow feeling in this room more than I'm personally experiencing right now. I know that somebody wants something about standards, or for lack of an easier word. I haven't seen anything from the people who are clamoring for them. I have just heard that you want them. I don't want us to spend more time at every meeting or every other meeting talking about, as Bernie Sanders would say, the damn emails, the damn proposal. We have got to put this one behind us so that we can try to move on on a path that's characterized a little bit more by the consensus that typically does arise in this room. It's been a year. It's been a full year now that this board has been reconstituted, and we're still talking about the same thing, irrespective of the numbers being placed on the table. It's not right, and you know it's not right. You've got to get past it. Maybe what we can do is, if there were an amendment that accomplished something to put us on a track of the board establishing some draft of materials to talk with Vermont AA about, that would naturally come into play next July 1st, which is only gonna be half a year. Maybe we can do something like that. So what do you think? If there were an amendment that added to the proposal, and the VEHI board shall develop draft standards for, I don't know how to finish the thought because it's not my thought, for Vermont EA's consideration and mutual agreement, in time for July 1st, so we don't have to repeat this. It's not repeating, it's constant. This constant, frankly, bickering over stuff that is, in the larger scheme of things, less important than most of what we do. So I don't know, what do you think? Adding to the proposed thing, an amendment that would call upon the VEHI board to take a first crack at articulating in writing what it is that, whatever it is you're thinking about. It's just never been clear, because I know what Mark does. I don't doubt that it's possible for a local association of people, or any group of employees anywhere, or any group of people somewhere, to get it wrong and say, you can't attend this session. I don't doubt that that could happen, but that's not Mark's doing. And except in sort of the larger scheme of things, that's not Vermont AA's doing, and it's not even your doing. But if it happens, we ought to figure out a way of overcoming that. That's got nothing to do with the quality and extent of the work being provided. Now, I don't know how to resolve this, folks, and it's way late, and I thought this one had a really solid chance because it reflected the spirit of compromise more than we've had up to this point.
That compromise is what I'd written down, and so I'd like to know if we can get there with the folks that are inclined to vote no on this. I'm open to an amendment. Things I've written, and this is not my forte of crafting this language, but
Well, you've done really well before.
that we, pass this contract, with the condition that criteria for evaluation will be established by, pick a date, March 30th, whatever we wanna go with. In that the expectations of that will not exceed 90% of the Vermont NEA employees' work time. Would something like that fit for anybody? Is that enough or not enough? Is there a different way of saying? Because again, we're looking at a place where I'm hearing that we do understand that Mark does, that Vermont NEA provides this service at a level we want, and that we all see challenges coming ahead. But we haven't outlined anything, so we haven't outlined our expectations, and so we're asking the service provider to guess at what we want. And that's not a good place. But we're also recognizing that in good faith for 20 years, they have provided. And so just as the conversation went earlier,
100,000 people.
even though Rob said that in many ways, our situation, could have concerns about, because of the people involved, he was okay. Because of the people involved now with this situation, I am also okay. Put whatever you want into my amendment, or into my motion, so that we can pass this tonight with timelines for what you need. I'm open to that.
I think, I haven't heard John say it, I'm not asking you to say it, but Martha and Tracy, I think, have both said either directly or indirectly that it's not the amount of money in this proposal that's the issue. So the only question, as far as I can tell, in your minds is, what additional feature is needed and not, is now needed. It's our obligation to articulate, not Vermont NEA's. It's Vermont NEA's obligation to respond and work it through if there are any changes, but it's not their obligation. John?
Well, I want,
You did have a question
Well,
about that
no,
before, I'm
I-
sorry.
yeah.
I forgot that.
I want to acknowledge that this is a very challenging conversation. Everyone has been hanging in there. I also want to acknowledge that there have been, from everything I've seen in the 3 meetings now, a lot of divisive conversations and a lot of frustration with things. And what I want to express is that, you know, there is frustration with things that people end up taking, and I will say, feel like that there's a target going in some direction. I don't see that as about this. I'm going back to what I said before about, I've got to be able to take the questions and the criticism. So, you know, Mark, I understand your frustration, but you were raising your voice before. I understand you have a right to it. I understand you were upset.
I apologize.
But, you know, I heard a board member at this very table say in one of these meetings, our teachers don't even understand these plans. So that's my frustration when we say, we have a service agreement in place. I'm not saying, you know, and that comes back on me because I get criticized by my employees for what the hell did you get us into? And my HR department gets criticized for it, and they get yelled at for it. And they have done an awful lot of work, and Mark will attest to that, as will Laura and Bobby Joe, in trying to educate the staff in you know, so it's not just Vermont NEA's not doing their job, or the very HR department isn't doing their job. It's a challenging situation. And I think we are calling questions that are saying, what the heck do we need to do to get it right? So I think you're raising the right things for what an amendment might need to be. I'm asking the questions because, again, I'm looking at, you know, I see what was put as a proposal, but, you know, my initial thing that I came in here with is, that seems like a pretty big increase. That's where I was coming from. That's been addressed 3 times already, so I don't need to hear an explanation again. I'm just telling you what I came in with.
I want to say one thing before I yield to Jeff, and it feels needlessly defensive of Mark. He has the best speaking voice on the planet, and when he gets into it, it goes up. I just want to add that my voice has been integral to this plan, as has that of several other people.
And that's what I started by acknowledging.
Okay.
I agree with you.
So the document you have is not a,
Service agreement,
it's not a service agreement.
understood.
There is a service agreement that VEHI produced that we have signed
Produced.
With terms.
with terms in it. So the objective measures or criteria, they're in the VEHI created document that Vermont NEA ultimately ends up signing, or has signed in the past. So this is just trying to put into writing where we were vis-a-vis cost, how we got there, give you some rationale for duration. That's what we were trying to do. It was not trying to suggest that there are no criteria here. Absolutely true, guilty as charged. Those are actually found in the contract. So that's just responsive to that, criticism of this memo or the proposal. It's not designed to put criteria.
Looking at the history of this, thank you, Jeff, that highlights this for me, and Tracy, this is not needless criticism, but it's a review of where we've been. We've had the discussion in this table about the amount of money. We were on the verge, except we weren't, of actually adopting an amount of money, except that we couldn't get there. During that discussion, there was no mention of changing the service agreement. If there was, no action was proposed to change the service agreement. If there's genuine, close to agreement, I can't help you, John. I think this amount is way below, as I think people in this room will remember, I would have proposed. If there's general agreement about the amount, and general agreement about the board reviewing the service agreement within a certain period of time for presentation in anticipation of fiscal 21's service agreement. I don't know what more we can possibly collectively do to get over this hurdle. I just don't know. I really don't. I don't know what there is left. Laura?
Well, there was a word, I'm just trying to help, maybe you shouldn't.
We thought you were gonna throw bricks or something.
Tracy used the word once, I think, deliverables. And I'm wondering whether that is maybe a better word than criteria. I don't think the service agreement has criteria, I think it has a scope of services. And when she said the word deliverables, I picture things such as, I'm making stuff up now, right?
Okay.
15 workshops or one at each, bargaining I mean, we've got a whole new proposal with the statewide commission, right? A webinar. I'm thinking that maybe it's very specific, you go beyond it, but a minimum number of things. And I don't know if that helps move this conversation
That's what I mean
forward.
by deliverables. And my recollection of the proposal that was voted down about renewal was one, that it was 1 year. And it was 1 year with, and maybe the final motion didn't have it, but we were talking about 1 year and a commitment to articulate, I'm gonna switch to the word deliverables rather than scope of services. And it really was specific to the employee education, subscriber education piece. And maybe that didn't get into the motion, but I think that was at least that was my thinking behind, let's have a service agreement, keep things on course, and keep working on that clarity about deliverables, so Mark isn't frustrated.
Mark's not frustrated
No.
with his work.
No,
Mark's
but
frustrated with the characterization of his work.
so that there isn't a disconnect between different people's beliefs about what should be happening and what is happening, so we all are on the same page and we can evaluate and give fair feedback and know that we're getting what we want. I think we want the same
I
things.
think we do as well.
I think we want the same things, the question is how to get there.
Can I, let me add, so I ended up signing the service agreement, and I work with Mark on a day-to-day basis. We don't see him, I saw him in the hall today, we chatted in the hallway about tonight's meeting, about OneCare generally, which I think is VEHI work. We could debate that or whatever, but it was about VEHI and its interaction with OneCare. I signed the agreement though, and I supervise Mark as much as I possibly can. He's incredibly good at his job, I think. But I never hear, through the course of the agreement, I never hear any complaints from Laura. I know that Mark meets with Laura, goes to Blue Cross. He does the things that, you know, this morning he ran out, or this afternoon when I got there or something, I saw him, he's running out to VEHI for a meeting, I assume. I assume that's VEHI work. He says he's going to VEHI. So I never hear through the course of the year of the contract, I don't hear anything negative. It's only when we get to the renewal that I hear problems or concerns. So my request going forward, should we sign another agreement, if you have concerns throughout the year, let me know. Because it seems inherently unfair to me. It makes me look bad, if you will. I'm supposed to supervise him, and then at the end of the year, you say, you did a bad, essentially what you're saying, and Mark's upset by the characterization of his work. Really what you're saying is, Jeff, you're not doing the right job. You're not, you know, Mark's not doing his job vis-a-vis VEHI. And so, but I don't hear that. I know that he works with Laura and Bobby Joe and other folks here at VEHI, but I don't hear about it until now, the renewals.
To be clear, it's not my role, I don't have a
Doesn't matter,
supervisory
that's not the
position.
point he's
Well,
making.
you don't hear from me because that's not the relationship.
I don't hear from anybody.
But I just
That's
want to
the
be
point.
clear for the.
I don't know, fair enough.
That's
I don't know
my
what you're supposed to
Point
be
is
here.
taken. We know
Laura,
that.
Laura.
Yeah, and that doesn't need to be in executive session, never mind.
So is there a motion, an amendment to be proposed to the pending motion or not?
Peggy said she was open to accepting an amendment, but
Yes,
there has not been.
that's correct.
Just checking the
I
minutes.
was hopeful that
Thought you were
Tracy
gonna
was
put also-
actually pending something, but you're not.
The wording's
I don't
wrong
want to
there.
risk putting into words your thoughts, because I typically don't succeed.
No.
So,
It's hard for me to think of it.
Well, if you want to mouth some words, I can try to fashion
the only
something.
parts to mine were really, is a date helpful? Is that enough for us? I mean, Vermont NEA has gone forward with, in good faith with us that we would settle this. I think it's in VEHI's best interest to settle this, certainly. With a date of some agreed upon scope of services slash deliverables.
Is there something wrong,
included?
folks, with using, I guess, the word deliverables? Is there something wrong with imposing on ourselves, the VEHI board, the obligation to review the service agreement with Vermont NEA to determine the extent, if any, to which our expectations are not reflected in it? I mean, you can say deliverables if you want. Does that make sense?
My only qualm with that is that that's been on the table for 4 years.
No, it is not formally.
Yes, it has.
Well,
I'm trying.
Tracy, you were the chair for 3 of those
Yeah, I
years,
know.
why didn't it happen? I can't,
It's my fault, I'm sorry.
well, I don't know if it's your fault, I don't know that any fault there
At this
is.
point,
But we're
there's a new
making a
board.
proposal here, my voice is raising, see? But I don't have a loud enough voice to make it stick. What is wrong with what I just suggested?
Can you repeat it?
That,
Did you write it down?
exactly, that the VEHI board will, by a date certain, review its service agreement with Vermont NEA to determine if it wants to change it in any respect. And if you want to insert something about deliverables, that's fine, but I think the way I word it includes everything. I don't, that's close to what I said, it's not exactly what I said.
So it's just saying that you're gonna review it.
Laura
It's not
only
saying
writes
that you're
down
gonna
what
clear-
is official.
You're gonna clarify. I would say review and clarify.
I mean, that's the motion in its entirety
Oh, so-
tonight?
The second, that.
It's an amendment
It would have
to
been an
approving.
amendment accompanying the, what?
To approve the agreement as written was the first motion.
Yep.
The amendment was to
To
say
add to it.
for the VEHI board to review and amend as necessary the scope of, or propose amendments to the scope of work and deliverables. And I don't know whether we have to say for Vermont NEA to then respond to. I mean, because we're kind of saying,
If
we're
we
gonna
say
agree to a contract and then we're gonna look at making changes to it, that's normally not how you do it.
Right.
If we say propose, well, I think without.
But we're not gonna make changes without Vermont NEA agreeing to
That's
it.
correct. That's correct. That's what Blue Cross Blue Shield might be.
Yeah, they're
They
gonna
have a
negotiate
provision
with
in
it,
there.
right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, Peggy, did you happen to get the last iteration that I gave you and see if it's good for John's purpose?
What I have is the VEHI board will, by a certain date, review, and I think John said and amend the service agreement with Vermont NEA, to determine if, there will be
It wants,
changes or
yeah.
something to that.
it wants to change it in any respect. I
That's
took
what
your
I said,
words.
thank you. All right, if it wants to change it in any, if it, meaning us, wants to change it in any respect. I don't know if it's understood, I think it's understood. We'd probably be approving the proposal for the current fiscal year and coming up with a proposal by late in this fiscal year in anticipation of going through next year's, the discussion for next year's thing. If we review it, it won't be before the end of March. We've got 2-3 months left in the year, and we're gonna end up having to talk with Vermont EA about it anyway.
Well, isn't it true that Vermont NEA is basically currently operating with that service agreement,
Yes.
almost like we do with negotiated
Exactly.
agreements? When you get to the end of the agreement and
Exactly.
continue to operate.
That's exactly.
So I didn't hear it in the motion, but are you saying we're only approving for the 1920 year?
Oh, I'd love to do more than 1 year, folks, because this is no fun for us, and you
I
know
know.
it as well as I do.
Well, I would-
And I think, I'm not speaking for Jeff, but he'll speak in a minute. I think the 85% for this year was basically a sweetener, frankly, for the VEHI board, because we know that the accurate number is 90%. So,
And it's 85 or 90% of an amount that is obviously
floats
changing
slightly.
every year.
it's like,
Right,
yeah.
right.
Just so I'm sure, I
That's
mean,
correct.
I get it.
That's what's a
Yeah.
percent of a changing dollar amount.
Here's what I would say too about their duration. We're already planning, like you folks are, I'm sure, planning your budget for the next fiscal year.
Understood.
And so, I think it would be helpful, to be very honest, that we look to at least an 18-month contract, which is essentially what we're talking about at this point. Instead of coming back here and anyway, it seems obvious to those of you who are in the school fiscal year.
Remember the happy and well-treated part of this.
But as intended, the motion was for 3 years.
That's for 3 years. I guess I'm questioning why we would go less than that if we've reached the agreement that we're going to revisit and review the deliverables. So that will be something we're all on board with. Again, they've given evidence as to why the 90% number. You know, I think it does fall to Fran's thoughts around, you know, not compensation, but fair treatment of service.
Terms of agreement.
Terms of agreement, you know, Visbit asked for it, they got it, Vermont NEA is asking for it, okay. Again, what I've heard is that people think that, for the 20 years, VEHI has been receiving the services and they have not, they may have had questions, they may have wanted to change some things, but have not acted on it. So to me, that means that there's some understanding of some good faith that things are happening here. The expectation is there that they'll continue to happen. I just don't know why we would go back to this in another year. When we negotiate contracts, we try to do it for 3 years at our local.
Not lately, but I get it. We want to.
We did, we went over, that's certainly what we hope to do, so we're not at this every single year.
I still,
Yes,
sorry,
Martha?
I still have a concern about approving a contract with criteria that we haven't talked about and discussed and agreed upon before we're saying we're entering into this 3-year agreement. That's just my opinion. I think we need to look at that service agreement and tweak it and get it the way that everybody is agreed on with the dollar figure that we're talking about, and then approve it.
I think we probably should have done that last year, knowing that the agreement was up for renewal and we didn't.
Anyway,
So I don't think it's
but
fair
we did,
to.
but in fairness, that didn't happen.
It's-
What if we put in some conditional language in here? This agreement shall extend through fiscal '22. I'm trying to tie the two provisions together,
Like only if,
so, hmm?
If and only if.
If and only.
That's a little severe, but it is. What I'm trying to establish here is that the agreement shall extend for 2 years if VEHI and Vermont EA reach agreement on changes that result from the proposal made by the VEHI board this year. We may not reach agreement, but that's the way it is, and then we revert to where we've been for.
Let's say, yeah, then what happens?
Peggy made a caveat in a while ago about any criteria or deliverables not exceeding a certain percent of time, right? Because it could be unreasonable, right? You could, but it's also, it seems to me that the percent of time might need to be, usually you start with the criteria and then the percent of time as opposed to the percent of time and then the criteria. So just something to think about.
In the best of all worlds, yeah.
So, we have a current agreement that was adopted the last several years, because it's been an annual agreement. I assume for a minute that that's acceptable to just about everybody at the table. It was adopted when it was 4-1 management controlled the board and 3-2, and I don't know how long it was before that. We were certainly willing to consider changes to the deliverables or criteria or whatever. But if they're excessive or inappropriate or whatever in our eyes, I would think that the current agreement is acceptable to all. How about that be the default? It is the agreement now that we have, if you will, we're operating under. I want to reach a place where you folks all get what it is you think you need out of Vermont EA. So, I mean, I think that's my thought is make the current agreement the default, and let's work together to try to figure out how to change it and amend it or adapt to the changing world that VEHI finds itself in today.
Remember too that this educational curriculum we're talking about, it's gonna be done before this board's done with its deliberations. We have to hit the ground running on January 1st. In fact, we're probably gonna start this work before January.
We don't even know what the
No, what I'm
decision
saying is, we're gonna start thinking about how, in our conversations with the TPAs recently, we've been talking to them about how we can begin to conceptualize an outreach program, even before we know the specific terms. So our education thinking is gonna begin even before that decision comes down. It will intensify once that decision comes down, because then we'll have specifics around it. But 2020 and 2021, it's gonna be all hands on deck around here.
Remember, these TPAs aren't going to necessarily be adopted by the member districts.
No, but we still have a lot of education work to do around all that.
Laura, if I understand it right, you're gonna be faced with, until the arbitrator's decision, you got 2 options, not thousands of combinations, right? The arbitrator's gonna choose one
I
plan.
don't know what the 2 options are.
Well, but you people will, I mean, I live at home
You go to our
all the
website, they're
time.
on there,
I was not aware that they were public.
it's on our public website.
They are.
Mark didn't let me know, so I didn't know
Oh.
they
Well,
were.
we haven't talked about it. I wasn't keeping it a secret from you.
It was just turned in Tuesday.
Just turned that, it
Even
just
if
went
they're not
live.
2 days
public.
ago.
It's not a
Even
secret.
if they're not public, I'm pretty sure VEHI can ask VSBA.
No,
to
VEHI
provide
does
it.
not know what the things are unless they're out
They
in
won't
public.
know the outcome, they will know the specifics of their proposal, and the arbitrator has to choose one or the other.
I understand the process.
Oh, my only point was, we're gonna be in some ways on parallel tracks as we talk about deliverables and criteria, at the same time as we're responding on real facts on the ground in real time.
Are we close?
I think so.
Okay. Tracy, are we close?
I'm struggling with, the time and my ability to make a good decision.
Well, you're not alone there. Martha, are we close?
I think we're close. I think we
Okay.
need,
So what's the gap? What's left? What is it?
I don't have any real sense of any motion on
We're
the
not,
table.
no, the motion's not there yet.
Okay.
Just, we're trying to have a conversation here.
Got parts of
Rather
those.
than-
there's a motion, but
I have 3 or 4 different language versions, but none of them.
Laura,
have been-
please, I understand that. I'm trying to see if we can reach some sense of consensus here that would result in our ability to put the final language together. Martha, so I'm gonna put a little pressure on you. What would change? What is it that you're looking for? I know what you've said isn't there, but I don't know what to do with it.
well, I'm kind of coming back to what John was just
Okay,
saying, that, you
good.
know, maybe, you know, we agree to this, and unless we come up with the criteria, the deliverables, the
Changes,
change of the service agreement by a certain date, we go back to the current contract.
What does that mean, the current contract, the amount?
Yes. Isn't that what, no.
I thought we were talking about deliverables.
I don't think that's what he meant at all.
Okay.
So but that's what you're suggesting, that we revert, we reduce the amount because we haven't agreed to changes? That doesn't feel right to me, does it? I mean, the amount of work is still being done.
Well, right
I thought
now,
we were
that's
talking
what
about-
we're working off
I thought we
of.
were talking about deliverables.
Right,
That's what she said.
and if we can't come, if this group can't come to an agreement as to what the deliverables should be,
Well, why won't we? I mean, how much bad faith is there in this one? That's a,
It's not
that's a
about that.
rhetor-
It's not
that's a
about
rhetorical
that.
question.
it's just we've been trying to
There,
do this
there
for
isn't a
quite
lot
few
of bad
years now.
faith.
We actually haven't been trying to do it.
We haven't been trying to do it with this group. We've only been
Right.
here, and so it's a fresh start for us. We spent a year going round and round, but we haven't committed to
Martha and I
making
have
those
been
changes.
trying, and we haven't been effective, and I
No,
hold
you
my
haven't.
ineffectiveness.
Let me say it this way, and kindly. We, as a group, have failed to address what you, and apparently Martha, believe you have proposed. I will own it, don't know what you're proposing. Until I do, I can't be expected to agree. So that's what I think we're wrestling with. How can we articulate in words, in real words, you know, that have substance, what it is you're trying to accomplish, so that we can see if we can work with it.
So I'd be happy to, between either now and December 20th, or another meeting, if that's not, if that's all care one or one care, whatever it is, articulate in writing as branded for the, Peggy did?
Fran did the
Fran did
principles,
this.
so it's.
Back in August, we
Yes.
did it back in August.
Look,
Yes.
with all
And
respect,
I'll be happy to
we,
do that.
we put in so much time on this right now. It would make so much sense to leave here with something that we can say we accomplished, rather than, oh, let's come back and talk about it again. Because we're not advancing the work. What if, I think we were close to this, what if we said, this year, take the proposal, the proposal for this year, accompanied by whatever the language is I spewed about, standards and that the board has to develop. And say that if the parties reach agreement about them, before June 30th of 2020, this agreement shall extend to years 2 and 3. Does that work? See, I've asked you what you want, and I keep saying, and I hear, let's put it off, or no answer, and I come up with another proposal, and I don't get an answer. What is the answer to this?
The answer is this is,
Is that
we
good?
received this last Friday, the Friday before. It changes several elements of the contract, including making it a multi-year.
Okay,
I'm
and so-
sorry, I need to think.
Okay.
I'm not able to respond to varying
But
proposals.
I think you said before that you'd be willing to have this a multi-year agreement if we reached agreement about whatever changes in quote deliverables unquote we would come up with. So I'm suggesting that if we do that, we don't have to revisit this discussion for a long time.
I would like to not revisit this discussion
Okay, so
for
what
a
is it
long
about
time.
my suggestion that you disagree with?
I want an opportunity to think through the implications of it, including the other parts of the proposal that we haven't had an opportunity to think about or talk about this evening.
What other parts?
The
It's
total
money.
value, the change in the way that fee structure is constructed over multi-years. I just have to think about that,
I
and I
don't know
didn't
what
think
that
about
means.
that
You mean
before.
85 to 90%?
Used to be Vermont NEA would come annually and say, this is what the cost is.
Yeah.
Like-
The way Visbit does.
Right.
Right.
But this isn't proposing that.
Because you didn't accept anything that Vermont NEA stepped into this room and asked for, Tracy.
That's totally not true, Joe.
Really?
I just need to, I'm winding down for the night. It's
Great.
past my bedtime.
Mine too.
There's a lot of emotion. I'm happy to consider a multi-year agreement. I'm happy to consider articulating deliverables. I'm happy to consider changes in the way compensation is structured. I appreciate the step that Vermont NEA took very much. I appreciate Mark personally and professionally, and I want to do the work to get this in a better place. And I'm sorry that
This will not get, this will
quarter
not,
of 10 is not the time for me to do that.
quarter 9.
No, it's quarter 9.
It's quarter.
Quarter of
This
9.
is not gonna get.
Yeah, that, it is kind of weird,
It's past my
the way it,
bedtime.
it's kind of in between one of the hands.
It is my bedtime.
It is quarter 9.
I don't wanna,
This is not gonna get resolved, I predict, unless Tracy and or Martha together or individually come up with proposed language to resolve this. I, for one,
happy to do
am
that.
beyond tired trying to settle this and resolve your concerns without any participation other than you're saying, that isn't what I need, and that's how I feel. So if you will take it upon yourself to develop a proposal, share it with me as vice chair and chair before we get together next, maybe we can work this out amicably without the need to engage the full board in lengthy discussion about it again. John?
I guess I was only gonna say, and I have no idea whether this is the right thing to say or not. I don't fully understand, and I know I read each of these service agreements at least once, but what the mechanism is by which VEHI has an amount each year. It sounds like it's different than the mechanism presented in this proposal.
I mean, Visbit?
Visbit.
It's way different.
There's also reading faces saying I said something wrong. I just don't know.
There's a lot of V's here. Well,
So, I don't know whether if Tracy's gonna go back and think about this, if she thinks about a mechanism for what the amount would be, that would make more sense than simply, and maybe there isn't anything better than an 85, 90, 90, I understand where it's coming
If
from.
we mimic the Visbit agreement, this proposal, I imagine, would increase, not substantially, but probably 10 to 15%.
Yeah, again, I don't
It
know
also
that,
come with the annual truing up,
Mhm.
one way or
Mhm.
another, an audit.
right.
An annual
Sure. I don't know what that means,
Right.
we don't do that.
And by my
That's
quick
probably why we haven't
calculation,
done it that way.
a 90% next year with a slight increase would be, it would go from 211 to about 225. That's what I just did
That's right.
quickly as I was thinking about this.
No,
Because it's
Oh, because of the
85% of
5%,
whatever,
the 5%,
yeah, so,
sure.
yeah. So it ends up being a 6.67%.
and maybe it'll make you feel better if you just went to 90% next year to get over it.
Again, I'm just trying to look at things that maybe are gonna help everybody at the table get to a place where we,
Well,
I think we all, again, I agree, we all wanna get to somewhere in the same thing, and I get this may have been a long and people feel like challenging discussion or fruitless. I was gonna say, I think it's actually been, for me, I've learned a heck of a lot. And again, we gotta have hard discussions to get to places.
Well, yes, I will say this, I agree, but we shouldn't have to have the same hard discussion over
And I don't have that history, but I understand.
over again. This is about the seventh
Mhm.
in 1 year. So, here's what my summary is, and see if you disagree. There's a motion on the table which will stay on the table, I presume, to adopt the proposal as presented by Vermont EA. There's conceptual agreement to go along with a multi-year agreement if we can develop language suitable to the board to be drafted initially by Tracy and/or Martha together. Tracy and/or Tracy and Martha together, to be shared with me before the next meeting, to see if we can't work out deliverables that are satisfactory to the full board, in which case, I'll finish the thought and hope I'm right, the board will agree to years 2 and 3 of this proposal. Is that a fair statement? I don't know if it is or not, frankly, I've lost track. Do you think it work?
I distracted myself
I
at the
think
end,
it's,
but.
I think it's a fair
If we
statement.
if we develop the language, if we develop,
I can talk to my seatmate.
no fair anybody having fun in mind, if I can't laugh at mine. What I said was, year 1, we are all in essential agreement. I can't speak for John, but he just said he's okay with the whole thing. You and/or you and Martha will develop proposed language about the concerns you've expressed that we are now summarizing with the word deliverables. You'll share it with me, we'll try to work it out so that it's in a form that,
Can be
with
expedited.
luck, the full board will be in agreement with, at which point the board will adopt years 2 and 3 of the Vermont EA proposal as it will be amended for that purpose.
So there's percent of time, there's money, there's deliverables, there's number of years. And the only thing still up for discussion is the deliverables?
I think so. Unless
The
you're trying to, are
deliverables
you
doesn't
trying to say
impact
that?
the time, that doesn't impact the money?
Look, I personally don't care. If Vermont EA is willing to accept the percentages as they are, and we are, I don't think we ought to be standing in the way of that. If 85 is enough for this year, and 90 is enough for next year, and we know it's not gonna fall below 90, I think Vermont EA is in the frame of mind to accept it. If it goes down substantially, then we can, I don't know how we're gonna know it until after the fact. The way we wouldn't know it except after the fact with Visbit, and we don't make any adjustment there. Visbit makes its own adjustment, I guess,
So may I
but
ask
not,
a
not
clarifying
under the agreement.
question? Because the way you started it,
It's on the VEHI
Yes.
account
it
too.
sounds like you were
VEHI
saying you're
agreements.
basically tabling this motion until the 20th, when we have the expedited
I think that's what I
motion.
said, I don't know
Okay.
how else we would
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that's what you were saying.
If you want
We're
to adopt,
tabling
if
this
you want to
motion.
adopt year 1 now, I can't stop you, and I'm not gonna, but
Are you tabling the motion? You said you leave it on the table. I had the motion was not acted upon.
I think this is.
Which one allows us to pick up right here next time? Tabling or?
I actually don't
no
know, I
action?
don't know the
I don't
right
know.
vocabulary to use here, but our intention is to leave it where it is and to pick up where we left off.
Okay.
So I think not acting on it is not quite the same.
Then we need to table it, don't you?
Yeah,
We need
table,
action.
table is
So we'll
probably
table it
better.
with an expectation
We'll pick up here.
Motion to
Of considering it
Second.
as the first order of business at the next meeting.
On December 20th?
We'll
December
figure
20th.
it out. I
Unless we
know
have
what I
those
just
ones
said.
here.
Forget that I just said that. We'll have to figure that out.
So there's a motion to table, made by John, seconded by Martha.
All in favor of tabling the motion with an expectation of picking up off the table at the next business meeting?
I,
Can we go somewhere
And
else?
if we don't, you know,
Next business meeting gives you a little cover.
Yeah,
Good.
we'll figure it
Mr.
out.
Cook, you need to ask for anyone against.
Hmm?
You need to ask if there's anyone voting against.
Is there anyone voting against?
Yes, I vote no.
Thank you, all right.
Did you want that noted, because
she
all I've been
does.
saying is motion's
Yes, she
passed.
does. I appreciate that, Fran, I understand the sentiment underlying it. And I probably would have done the same if I weren't sitting here as the chair. So, there's more items on the agenda, we're not gonna get to them. I will say this, I would appreciate it if, well, I know we can't do that, I'm sorry. I'm concerned, I have no idea what legislation may be in the works for next year. I know that the mere passage of time is enough to prevent VEHI from taking positions on those very few legislative items that probably make sense for it to go in on. We need a process, and so if you will review the process proposal that I drafted very quickly, it's not a finished work of art. I would appreciate it, and we will consider it at the next business meeting as well. Yes,
You currently have no president officer. You will soon have no secretary. So I don't know if you want to act on those tonight. And I suggest that you actually set a January meeting, since it was hard to set the December meeting.
I'm willing to set the January meeting, I'm not willing for us to spend a lot of time on officers.
Not
right
even
now.
the secretary role, because you do without a
Not
secretary.
even the secretary, right, tonight. It's not Martha's problem, it's ours, and
I just want to make sure
I don't know
that
how, I don't know how we're
that
gonna,
wasn't missed.
I think it's gonna require at least some minimal discussion, and I don't know what contours that discussion's gonna look like, but it's way too late for us to consider it tonight. You can hear that in my voice. Thank you, John. I'll see you.
Thank you all. Thank you,
That's it, January. I'm all for setting a meeting in January. I'm also all for forcing Lisa to do it.
That is fine, it just usually is more
I
effective if
agree.
you do it here,
I agree.
because it's very hard to get this group to have a meeting.
Yeah.
So on the premise that we will meet on December 20th, we're not necessarily talking about early in January, am I correct?
Well, I don't know that.
Well, it's,
It is a struggle to get a meeting pulled together
I
and,
think
and materials out a week ahead around holidays.
Yep. I live that life, forget it.
How does the week of January 13th look for people?
Probably not as good as the following. No, actually, yeah, because
I'm in January 19th.
Was it budgeting?
the sixth, no, well, the 16th actually works for me.
Well, there you go. All right,
The
that's a
15th
proposal,
would work.
January 16th, Thursday.
You have a commitment on the sixteenth.
I do.
You do?
Hey, folks, can we resolve it?
15th works for me.
15th works?
15th?
Martin Luther King's birthday, it's my brother's
Yeah, I know
birthday.
what it is, I believe you.
But
All right, 15th, we grab
No,
it.
we won't, 15th?
The
How about you,
4:30
Martha?
time,
The 15th sounds great.
All right.
Martha's over there just smiling away.
Fran and Peg,
again, 4:30.
forgive my
works for
inability
people.
to get initials right. What did I call you this time?
Meg.
Meg? I don't understand.
my aunt used to call me
I know
Meg,
it's-
I answered to lots of
Meg,
things.
Meg.
All right, so January 15th?
Right. So either way.
That was too easy.
Do you two want to set an agenda call
Not now,
about 10 days before that meeting?
probably. First, yeah,
So why
Probably.
couldn't you set a
'Cause I don't
call
want
10
to
days
now.
before the meeting?
because I don't know what I'm doing that week.
It's probably gonna be in Florida.
No, that's April, but before that, there's a week in February and a week in March that I'm not gonna be around even.
But this is 10 days before.
I understand. I just don't.
No.
So, this is a 4:30 meeting in
That's what
January?
people said.
Hmm?
So December 20th at 9,
Ooh, thank you, folks.
January
You know,
15th at 4:30.
Are you adjourning?
well, I'm almost adjourned. I don't know how to come across in discussions like this. sometimes I just lose it, I realize. This has been the most frustrating experience. Now, let me start it a little less. This has been among the most frustrating professional experiences of my career. This simple discussion about renewing the contract. And we're better than this. We're damn well better be better than this as we go forward. The next few years aren't gonna be any easier than the last few years. So, if you consider that a lecture, I'm sorry, but that's how I feel about it. And I hope we can work much more collaboratively about things like this than we've been able to in the last year. I think the last meeting, by the way, was particularly noteworthy because we adopted 6 or 7 motions unanimously. I think we can probably do that.
It's all your fault.
Maybe it's because
You
Peg
did that
wasn't
today,
here.
actually?
I wasn't here, maybe it's me.
Everything you did today was unanimous except for one?
Except for one, good. Okay, I mean, you're making my point. It's, this issue has divided us, has kept us separate. And it colors our attitudes, it colors the duration of our meetings. It's really an issue. Thank you all very much. And Chris, I don't know why you're still here. I really don't get it. You know, these are public meetings and it's out of work hours. If you want to spend your time here, that's fine.
Never out of work hours when you're a salaried employee.
That's all right.
That's fair. Well, actually, that's not true. I'm sorry, let me say why it's not true. If you're in an organized, or unionized environment, that's definitely not true.
We're not in a game.
And if you are, you probably have employment contracts, which if they don't
That was the
specify,
piece that.
You don't have employment contracts.
well, you
That
should.
was the piece that-
Well, you
Just
damn well
like I
should.
am.
Chris, if you need any help organizing,
And
you
she
let me know.
needs to do the work required to.
Okay, since I'm off the clock, I'll tell you how I feel about that. You'll need an account. All right?
It's up to you.
That's,
Your
yep.
loss.
Well,
Your loss.